All gave some gave all. Some would march on, others would fall. There are no winners in war when you consider the cost. You cannot justify the thousands of lives for our own that were lost. Wars leave scars that in time may fade, but not without taking a toll. However, the deepest wounds are those that scar the very heart and soul. For those that saw action during wartime, I'm sure without a doubt, they've had to live with the memories of fallen comrades, their brothers, someone they cared deeply about. And all the families left behind with only their memories to carry them through, also paying the price of freedom won for me and you. We are all aware that times have changed, and yet there are certain things we must never forget. Be proud of our flag, and long may she wave, and long may we remember what so many gave.
I'm Pat Engel. I was living in Sioux City, Nebraska, when I went into the Air Force, and actually went to University of Nebraska. My wife and I were working our way through college, and I graduated to Advanced Air Force ROTC. And at that time, we all had to go into pilot training, which I wanted to do. Of course, when I went down to Lackland in Texas, they had too many pilots, so every other one of us, they flunked out because the medical said I was colorblind, and I'm still not colorblind. I learned to fly after I got out of the service. So that's how I got in, and that was in 1955. And I was in the Air Force for a little over 4 years, and I was 22 years old when I was drafted, and we had my graduation present from the college was that year was my first daughter. And so they sent me to intelligence school, and I spent 9 months in school, and then from there I was sent over to Wiesbaden, Germany, and I worked in the intelligence field there, and we spent time there and in Incirlik Air Force Base in Turkey that was when the U-2 was flying over Russia and so forth. Gary Powers was the pilot that was shot down over Russia, and that's who we worked with at that time. So we worked with the CIA, etc. All the time I was in the Air Force. And I enjoyed it very much. It was just a small group of us. We became very, very good friends and remained friends all of our lives. And there's only about 3 of us left now, because time takes its toll, as we mature, as they say. So I was never in any active war, but down there we covered the Middle East wars, which they've had ever since time began. And back then it was the Egyptians and the Israelis, etc., down there, and the French were involved, etc. So we covered the wars, but we weren't actually involved I wasn't in any combat or anything like that. We were in the know of a lot of things that were happening that other people didn't, and that was one of my biggest rewards. I think is when Eisenhower was in Paris during with the Russians and the French and so forth, and that's when Gary Powers got shot down, and he denied it, and that was 4 years after I got out of the service. And I knew it happened, but at that time you couldn't talk. Of course, it was declassified many years later, so that's why I can talk about it now. So there was, stuff like that. And we covered the corridor from Frankfurt, Germany, up to, they had the corridor up to Berlin, and they did hammer work in between there too. So that's the type of thing that I did. And as far as my least favorite duty assignment, I think the only thing that would be just petty things like, once a month we had to do guard duty and so forth, go around, check, make sure everything was closed up, because the commission had to carry a gun that I couldn't hit the broadside of a barn with, but that was part of the, menial duties like that. And we had 2 children over in Germany, $7 a piece, by the way, very cheap. 2 more after at home. But the thing is, with when I got out of the service, I was a little scared getting out because I had 3 children and a wife, and I didn't know what I was going to do as far as supporting them, But I worked with the CIA, so I sent my wife and kids home, and I interviewed, and I was offered a job at the CIA. But I'd been in Washington and so forth, and moving all over the world. And my wife didn't think that's a good idea because she moved around so much as a child. So she taught me to go and work for State Farm, which I did. she was right all the time. You don't make any money for a long time, but finally you're able to support everything. Then we had 2 children after that, so it worked out that we had a good life that way, and we kept in touch with our old friends. We had a lot of reunions and so forth, and we've been back to Wiesbaden different times where the kids were born. A lot of these young people, I don't like some of these wars we've been in where they're over there, getting killed and maimed and so forth. But for on the average, I think the kids learn so much. They learn some discipline. They also can learn trades and so forth in the service. But I think they're lacking a lot of that right now. They appreciate our country, and that's what's lacking now, I think. And so many young people, they don't realize what we have in this country, that they're basically giving it up with what's happening in our political world now. And that's what scares me, is because of their future. Another thing too, I got to say something about living in Nebraska too. Nebraska is still one of the states where people appreciate each other. They appreciate the work ethic. And it's a great place to grow up yourself, raise your family. So I think we have one of the best right here in the Middle West, where we live a normal life, where they don't in a lot of places. So.
I'm Darryl Harrison. I had enlisted in 1973 out of Omaha, Nebraska. I was in for 1 year in the Air Force. My biggest challenge when I was in the military was I was going through second class naval diving school, and on the last day of training they had what they call a Black Monday or Tuesday. It doesn't matter anymore what day it was, but it was a day. And they put us in the swimming pool, and the object was to harass us to see if we could handle it. And if you went to the top of the water, you were automatically out. And you never saw that guy. If he went to the top, you just never saw him. He was gone. Well, I was a little bit cocky, and as they were beginning to circle around us, I waited till one of the instructors got right in behind us, and I got him exactly where I needed him, and I kicked him in the head. Knocked off his mask and flooded it. And what I didn't realize is how coordinated those instructors were at the time. He twirled his finger in the water there, and pretty soon 4 of them hit I and my partner. Before we knew what happened, everything, all of our gear was on the floor of the pool, and if we went to the top, we were out. I looked, and my partner was almost there. I had to grab him by the shorts and pull him back down to the bottom of the pool. Open up the valve, put the regulator in his mouth, and I knew that Bill needed 3. We knew each other extremely well by this time in our training. He needed 3, and then I think I took probably a couple of teeth out when I pulled the regulator out of his mouth, and I was able to get my air. And the whole time we circled and circled to be ready in case they came back after us again. That was probably the most challenging, was to regroup from being a little too cocky in my day. My least favorite duty was when we were with the Navy. They had this thing that we in the Air Force had never heard of called standing watch. To us, it was something that came out of the day of wooden ships and peg legs. We had no idea what it was all about, and we thought they were pulling our leg, that we had to go stand a watch. That's probably the biggest tail chewing I've ever taken, and threats that I took legally as far as they were going to file this or file that. We didn't miss another one. And not to belittle the Navy one bit, because they taught me how to scuba dive, and it's the one thing that I still use. I still love to scuba dive. Memorable moments. I've got one of those. Everybody does. I think they have to. I can remember when I was in what they called indoctrination training. That was your first class going into pararescue. And what they did was that they white glove inspected us every morning or at random, whatever they chose. And we couldn't get our office area to shine. The floor would not shine. There was so much wax on it, it wouldn't do it anymore. And we didn't have any tools. So the only thing that we had that would get that wax off there was we had to scrape it off with our belt buckles. So here was about 12 guys all down on the floor on their hands and knees scraping wax off the floors. It took us all weekend to finally get done and have one coat of wax just shine. We were proud. Monday morning, in came the sergeants, and they started inspecting. Oh, we passed it gloriously up at the office. But in the meantime, we'd left some other things behind. By the time they got done with us, they took us out on that floor that we just got done waxing, hot, humid San Antonio. We owed them 400 push-ups. And they were nice to us. They said, we'll only make you do 200 push-ups and 200 sit-ups. So off we went on our brand new floor that we just got done doing. The sweat ate the wax right off the floor. Looked like one of those mass murder scenes where they tape the bodies. Yeah, so that was a memorable moment. All that work just blowed up, and all we could do was laugh and go and do what we had to do. I spent 7 years, what I call the colorful years. And many of the guys that you'll talk to out there might call that the days in the woods. It's that time when you come out of the military and you can't find yourself yet. And I went on to teach school, and I enjoyed teaching as an industrial arts teacher and as a media specialist for many years. So there's tough, there's good, there's bad, but in the end, those skills came back to save me.
My name is Thomas Menard. I lived in Sioux City, Iowa, mainly all my life. I enlisted in the Navy at the end of boot camp when I was 17 years old. I was spent most of my time flying, but my biggest fun was flying. Getting up there in the blue, and you could see everything, so that's one good thing about that duty. But my least favorite assignment was basically in Thompson Nook Air Force Base in Vietnam. Seen more, you didn't know who was the Viet Cong and who wasn't down there. So that's the only thing I hated down there, because we had to go from where we were staying in a hotel in Saigon and get transported out to the field every day. And you didn't know what you was going to run into every day. So that's the only bad thing about that. But I think my most favorite tour duty was instructing. Teaching these guys the aircraft that I was flying on, transporting people and cargo, across the world. And I think that's just about the biggest thing there is to it. I wouldn't change anything about that. And I don't know about kids these days, but I think it's a good rude awakening for 90% of them now. Because I don't think a lot of them get the strictness that they really definitely need. And you can get it when you're in the military. My proudest moment is when I made chief. But other than that, getting the Navy Achievement Medal, that was a big thing too. And not everybody gets the Navy Achievement Medals. Over about that, I think I would tell people the best thing would be is go in the military, period.
Hello, I am Jeff Finken, and I was living in Vermillion, South Dakota when I was contacted by a buddy who had just joined the Air National Guard. And I was 19 years old, and I was in my freshman year of college. This is at a time when there was really, this would have been 1986. We weren't involved in any conflicts at the time or any war of any type. So when I got in, they were doing recruit drives, basically, and my buddy, I remember him telling me that if he got 3 people recruited into the unit, he was actually going to get a trip down to Vegas for doing that. During your time at the National Guard, of course, they're picking up some of your tuition for college and giving you the GI Bill. So it was, for me, that's how it all started out, just to kind of pay for college. And beyond that, though, once I had my 6 years in and had the choice to choose whether to stay or go, I chose to stay, and I'm glad I did. If you ever ask me what I would do differently as far as being in the service, I would say nothing. I was a member of the 185th for 32 years. I just retired in 2018. During that time, I totally enjoyed it. Totally enjoyed working with people. I started out enlisted. I ended up commissioning as an officer after my first 13 years in. And so with 32 years of experience, I wouldn't change a thing. Of course, once 9/11 occurred, we were all pulled into the war. So my first opportunity to go to Iraq was in 2005. They got me all prepped for it. I was ready to go. I was about 2.5 months short of being a captain when I was supposed to go, and I was going to be assigned to the Army, and they wrote back and said they don't want a lieutenant, they want a captain. So I didn't end up going that time, but back later on in 2009, I went to Baghdad, Iraq, and I served there for about 7 months as a unit movement officer. So what my job entailed was moving people on fixed wing aircraft, helicopters, getting lodging ready for the troops as they come in. So I literally had some real tough experiences in getting all this arranged. Extremely busy all the time. Working over there, they had sandstorms. And when the sand started blowing, things just did not fly. Helicopters didn't fly, fixed wing aircraft didn't fly. So people did not fly, and a lot of these people were at the end of their tour. They'd been there already almost a year, and they were ready to get out of there. So they thought that the next day they would be flying out. Well, it doesn't happen that way because, again, there's another group ready to fly out the next day. So really, I had to part the rest of those people into the flights, any seats that happened to be available. So that was a lot of pressure. I had a lot of people give me grief about that. It actually turned out to be a very good experience in the end. 6 months went by, I had it down, I figured it out, and it was just, when I got back, when you look back at things, you just realize how much you accomplished, and it gives you just a great feeling. Now, I also went to Afghanistan in 2012, had a totally different duty. My duty was to order large dollar supplies such as up-armored vehicles, generators, huge tents. One of the things that I had to do in Afghanistan, they discovered that my civilian job, I was a police officer, so they sent me on 2 different Army investigations, and I ended up on helicopters going to forward operating bases. One was on the Pakistani border, and one was north of Kandahar. Well, they made the mistake of just throwing everything into a contractor truck, an Afghani contractor truck, with ammo and guns and things that weren't supposed to be directed through the Afghanis. The reason why I got involved is because during that trip, overnight they parked the vehicles and they actually caught some Afghanis trying to steal the ammo and guns. It just turned out to be an exploratory, what can we do better to let these people know, the troops know that you got to move correctly. The one humorous story I have about belonging to the 185th is in 1997 I got the chance to fly in the back seat of a F-16, and they always tell you not to eat before you go up because that you're pulling a lot of G's and a lot of people get sick. So really all I had that morning was a couple of granola bars. I shouldn't have had them, but I got the ride of my life for about an hour, and I'm up there, and he let me take control of the stick for just a little while, and then he let me do an aileron row, so you basically roll upside down, and it was just a good time. And then he took over and did some racing, and I started to get sick. There was a point when he said, "Do you want to take over again?" I'm like, no. And they also give you a bag, so I ended up getting sick in the bag. But I get off the plane, and here comes the base commander towards me, and he wants to tell me a couple of jokes, and I'm just sicker than a dog at this point. So he starts telling me a Rodney King joke, actually, because of the cop thing. And so that's one thing I remember about Colonel. Would I do it again? Absolutely. Would I recommend it for young people? Absolutely.
Immediate release. August 11, 2001. Department of Defense identifies service members killed in CH-47 crash. The Department of Defense announced today the deaths of 30 service members who were supporting Operation Enduring Freedom. They died August 6, 2011 in Wardak Province, Afghanistan, of wounds suffered when their CH-47 Chinook helicopter crashed. Masters-at-Arms Petty Officer First Class John Dundara, a member of the Naval Special Warfare personnel who support the SEALs, was among the names released that had been killed. John Dundara, 26, worked as a dog handler for the elite military unit. The family's sadness was tempered with pride that their brother and son had served his country, a country that welcomed these Laotian immigrants 31 years ago. We are proud Johnny fought for the country that embraced our family and gave us the opportunity to reach the American dream, said Chain Fallon, the oldest of 5 children in the family. The Doandaras fled communist forces in their native Laos in 1979. After the birth of their first child, daughter Chain, they immigrated to the United States, part of a large contingent of refugees at the time who escaped Laos. Johnny was born 4 years later, the third of 5 children, and a 2003 South Sioux City High School graduate. I don't think my brother would call himself a hero, Chain Fallon said. He was doing his job, doing what he believed in. But in our hearts, he'll always be our hero.
Hi, I'm Tyler Cleveland. I was living in Sioux City when I enlisted in the Army National Guard. I was 18, and I went to basic training the summer after I turned 18. Most of my time served was in Afghanistan and Iraq. And now I live back in Sioux City. Again, I got out in 2010 and started in 2002. I did have a least favorite duty assignment station. It was Kuwait. Kuwait was just so hot, so unbearable while we were there. Like upwards of like 138 degrees Fahrenheit. And we were in full battle, battle rattle is what we called it. There was a humorous story I want to talk about though, and it was when I was in Iraq. We were in the middle of the desert pulling area security, and a squad member of mine, there was a lizard that was crawling around on the ground. It was during the day, so it was like, bright out and everything. Too bright, actually. And there was a lizard crawling around on the ground, and one of them bet me that I wouldn't eat it or swallow it. And it was just hilarious. Like, they kept going back and forth if I was going to do it. And then squad leader, he put $50 on that too. And so, actually the squad member, he gave $50 to me. And then the squad leader, he gave me another $50. So I went ahead and picked up this lizard, and it dropped its tail a couple times, and then I just ended up swallowing it. It was hilarious. they were laughing like crazy, and I got $100. So the worst day I could think about, we were north of our base of operations that we were at by quite a few miles, or quite a few clicks actually, and we were pulling security for the regular army, and there was Abrams tanks and Black Hawk helicopters that were positioned outside this small town, and there was reported terrorist activity by the Al-Qaeda, against these villagers. And they were killing children and killing these animals in this town and taking, stashing weapons and things there. And so the regular army went in and we had to pull security. I mean, we were several clicks away, like probably close to 8 to 10 clicks away. And, we could see everything, but it was really cool because it was that they were blowing up everything in this town, trying to get these Al-Qaeda members out of there. And it sucked because we were up for 72 hours straight, trying to stay awake, trying to do anything we could, drink anything we could, and it was grueling. It sucked. To wrap things up, I didn't have a whole lot of issues from my service that affected me until about 5 years after I separated. And today I have a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder or symptoms, as well as numerous other mental disorders. And I don't want to go into detail about that, but it doesn't help living with them on a day-to-day basis. And so one thing I can tell up-and-coming generations that are considering getting in the military, choose wisely.
My name's Danny Elkowski, and I was living in Sioux City, Iowa at the time of my enlistment. That was the year of 1965, and I was 18 years old at the time. My first duty station was in the Aleutian Islands, stationed on Adak, Alaska, which was a naval base, mainly radar equipment up there, and also they had some bunkers up there with some nuclear warheads. And at the time, President John F. Kennedy, excuse me, he said that all stations that had nuclear warheads stored on or whatever would be, they'd have the Marine Corps, a branch of the Marine Corps up there on the island. Another buddy of mine, we was headed down to they had a little place to have a little drink, or something, relax. So on my way down there, I told John, I said, wait a minute. I said, I recognize that voice. There's only one person in the world that has that sound of a voice, and that's my friend Michael Poussin. So I walked over there between all these tents, there's a little road down there, and sure enough, there he stood. And I said, Mike, I said, we gotta get together and have a little celebration here. And he said, that sounds good to me. He says, but Dan, he says, right now I'm taking my squad out tonight on patrol. And he said, sometime tomorrow morning, or maybe noon, he said, we'll get together. So of course I couldn't wait. I was excited about it because this guy was, he had a great sense of humor and a wonderful person. So the next morning, I'm up early, like 7 o'clock, but I thought, well, if he was on patrol, he probably won't get up till 10 or 11. So I waited until about 11 o'clock, and I walked over there, walking down through the same row of tents, and there happened to be a sergeant out there, and he could see that I was, looking for someone. And he says, Corporal, can I help you? And I said, yes, sir. I said, I'm looking for a friend of mine. And he said, well, who's that? And I told him, Michael Poussin. He said, oh, apparently you didn't hear. And I said, hear what? He said, a sniper took him out last night. Because that guy had to always be up front with the squad. He never put anybody on point. So I lost him. I didn't get to see him again. That's just one example, I guess. Several different things like that happened. I happened to bump into some other fellows that I had served with up in the Aleutians, and you know, it's just it's hard, you know. But it's been 53 years ago, so I'm definitely, you know, the memories about all I have left there. But that was one wonderful fellow. Very proud to have been able to serve with him. As far as the best day being in the service is when I graduated from boot camp, and we could go down to the PX and load up on candy and stuff because we wasn't allowed any whatsoever during our 2 months of training. So after our graduation ceremonies and we were dismissed, I think everybody made a beeline for the PX, and so that's one thing that I'll always remember. It was a great time to be called a Marine, because during basic they call you everything but a Marine, and it's pretty rigid training, but I think the theory behind that was the fact that, look, if you're going to break, we're going to break you here in boot camp and not wait till you're overseas in a situation that could end up causing some lives that are unnecessary. So I went along with that. And of course, our drill instructors, we had three drill instructors. One of them wore a black belt. He was the platoon commander, and then the other two were just our drilling sergeant. And then they always had one that would come in at night, and if you're having a hard time, he'd talk to you and make you feel like you're a human again. And his name was Sergeant DeZagel. Nice guy. But other than that, that's one memory as far as my graduation that I'll always remember, how glad that was over and how happy I was to be called a Marine. Of course, I got married and had a nice family, some great grandkids, one great grandchild, and been kind of living happily ever after, I guess. So.
And on closing, I just want to convey our appreciation and thank you for joining us today. Thank you, veterans, and to those who shared their stories and for standing up for Old Glory. We all know freedom isn't free. There's a huge price paid for all our liberties. God bless America, land of our birth, and God bless America, the greatest nation on earth.